Mr. Vice-Chancellor, I have the honor to request that you confer the degree of Doctor of Science honoris causa to David Hyman Fine.
I confer the degree of Doctor of Science honoris causa on David Hyman Fine. I call upon Dr. Fine to present his graduation address.
I'd like to congratulate all the new graduates who are going to get their degrees shortly, and especially to those who are the first in their family to receive a university degree, and their proud parents. The last time I was in this hall was 59 years ago, when I received my BS Honours degree, second class in chemistry. That was before all of you graduates were born, and that was before even most of your parents were born. So I feel it's appropriate for me to mention some of the lessons I learned that I wish I'd known very much earlier. The first is solving tough technical problems. To drink? Okay, I've got. We are taught that the way to solve a problem is to study it, become an expert, and then you can solve the problem. I found out the hard way that's wrong, wrong, wrong. And let me explain it by example. In 1975, I was told over lunch by a visiting expert the problem of nitrosamines that was mentioned earlier and how carcinogenic they were, but no one knew how to measure them. I knew nothing about analytical chemistry except what I learnt in my labs here at Wits. I knew nothing about nitrosamines. He had to explain to me that they had nitric oxide, NO, attached to nitrogen as part of the molecule. And with no knowledge whatsoever, I thought naively, oh, you just heat them up and measure the NO. I tried it the next day and it worked. And it broke open the field. And as I learned to work with the people who were the experts in the field, I kept asking, why didn't anyone else think of this? And I learned from reading about Shunryu Suzuki, a Zen Buddhist monk, who famously wrote, "In the beginner's mind, there are many possibilities, but in the expert's, there are few." That was the clue. If you're an expert, it blocks a lot of your innovative thinking. You want to be the beginner. So the right way to solve a problem is read about it just enough to understand it. No more. Stop. Then think of all the possible solutions. You'll have many. Then become the expert and really understand it. Now you've got the best of all worlds. You'll have a lot of solutions and you'll be an expert. I'll give you an indication of how that changed my career. The first 10 years after leaving Wits, I had published 20 papers in the technical literature. In the next 10 years, that was quadrupled to 90 papers. And it's always been, for me, the guiding principle. Don't become too much of an expert if you want to innovate in that field. The second sort of important lesson is the importance and to recognize that you will get pushback. When you have new ideas, people very often don't understand what you've done or don't believe what you've done. In that same nitrosamine field, I presented a paper at an international meeting, and no one believed what we had done. They thought it was rubbish, as I was told. I was told rather bluntly I was an incompetent fool, a naive idiot. About a year later, they organized an international round-robin study where they sent cans of food around the world, numbered 6 cans, to be analyzed, to see who could really do the analysis. We were able to identify which can had the nitrosamine, what nitrosamine was in there, the chemical identity, and the concentration. No other lab in the world could even identify which can had the nitrosamine. And again, the result was, that's impossible. No one could be that good. You must have cheated. You must have got hold of the codes. And it took a few months later when a visiting scientist came to my lab, and I told him to bring some samples with him and we'll show him how to do the analysis. And when this critic came and could do the analysis, that was the first time we got acceptance. It took 2 years. And that's typical of when you have new ideas. That sort of issue has happened to me many, many times, particularly if you're new to a field and you're making, you've got new ideas. Third item is the importance of chance, luck, serendipity. We all meet our spouses and our lovers by pure chance, by pure accident, serendipity. That's a very powerful tool. If it works so well for our personal lives, I started to use it in science as well. And to give you, just run through, some examples of what this meant for me. As was mentioned, I did a PhD in combustion, and I was measuring nitric oxide, NO, in flames. Then nitrosamines came along, and I used that NO knowledge to learn how to detect nitrosamines. When that became boring because we were now the experts, what else can produce NO? Well, nitro compounds, all explosives, all the military and commercial ones, nitrotoluene, nitroglycerine, ammonium nitrate, they all have NO2. So we developed an explosive detector based on that for forensic and finding the bomb before it had gone off. And that got us into air pollution chemistry. I mean, that got us into airport security. Just continuing to get bored when you were an expert because you were no longer having fun, you no longer had new ideas. Branching out into something different was very, very powerful. In 1980, a US intercontinental ballistic missile blew up in its silo because of a leak of rocket fuel. And we were natural to win a contract to find a better leak detector. And one of the compounds in rocket fuel at that time was the fuel itself, and the oxidizer was dinitrogen tetroxide, N2O4. And I got fascinated by this compound. Well, 20 years later, the same molecule, NO, became important as a drug for treatment of pulmonary hypertension. And how were they delivering it? They were delivering it in big gas bottles, 1,000 parts per million. They had to be very careful. It was almost like a welding set, and it could only be done in an intensive care unit. Very, very complicated, and very, very expensive. And we figured out that half a cc of this liquid N2O4 was the equivalent of what was in these very, very large gas tanks. So we developed a new way to deliver it from a package not much bigger than 2 cell phones, the entire package, including the electronics and everything else. And that got approved by the Food and Drug Administration in 2019. Now we were experts in drug development. It sounds zigzag, but it was a lot of fun, and it allowed me to keep on innovating, because if I stayed in any one of those fields, yes, I would have been an expert, and yes, I would have published more papers in that area. But it was no longer fun, it was boring. It was fun to just let your mind wander and go into the next area of it, and start as a beginner again. Be that young student again who has no clue what he's getting into. When everything works and you're a scientist, everything's going great, and you've had no failures for a while, everything's just great, beware, you're getting in trouble. And I say that very seriously, because you're not pushing the limits of your mind and not pushing the limits of your knowledge. You have to have failure. Failure is how you learn, and you have to understand that failure, you need to enjoy failure, thrive on failure, because that's how you jump to the next level. Again, let me give you an example. It was mentioned before, buried landmines. In 1998, I started getting interested in how to detect buried landmines. The old metal detectors didn't work because the new landmines are made of plastic. So since we were experts at sniffing explosives, this was going to be easy. We built a high-speed sniffer, very sensitive. The TNT diffused through the soil very nicely. But when we tried it in the real world, it was a complete failure. It was a failure because the TNT concentrated vapor was not really on top of the mine, it was next to the mine, depending on the topography, the angle of the sun, the slope of the land, the water runoff, the growth of vegetation. We had a total failure. And we had to sit back and think, how do you really want to find a mine? You really want to have miraculous vision and look in front of you and see the mines in the ground. Well, how do you do that? This was 1998. Cell phones were just coming in. You can receive a cell phone signal in this building through concrete. You can send a signal out. You can talk and people can hear you. So why not use cell phone frequencies and ping the ground? It's essentially ground penetrating radar at that frequency. We developed a system to do that, and instead of looking at the picture, we had the software analyze the picture. And to make it even better, we still had a metal detector, and we would only turn it on once we were sure we had a mine, just to make sure there was a detonator in the middle. The detonator had a little bit of metal. Now we could find all anti-tank mines, all anti-personnel mines, and under any soil conditions, and clutter was not a problem. The US Army acquired these, and many thousands of these have been built. But the lesson here was we had to fail, and this time fail pretty badly, before we could step back, rethink, and come up with the right solution. In conclusion, to all you graduates from Wits today, Wits is a world-class university. And you graduate today with a world-class degree, with the skill and knowledge not only change South Africa, but Africa and possibly the world. this is especially true of you who have graduating today with advanced degrees. You are the future. You are the chosen. And you're going to have so much fun as a world-class scientist. Thank you.